Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tech to Science podcast, the Earth, the Space, and the Human Race. I'm Abigail,
I'm Kavya.
and today we're going to discuss nutrition, specifically whether you and me, people in India cities, also have trouble meeting their nutrition needs. Joining us today for this podcast is Vinita Bali, a prominent business leader who has worked in various food companies in India and around the world. She has a special interest in nutrition, having chaired the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and has worked closely with the UN to scale up nutrition efforts around the world. We also have with us Inoshi Sharma, who is the director at the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. She heads the Eat Right India initiative and promotes the fortification of food at the national level. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vinita and Inoshi.
So in India, we have a wide spectrum of people across the economic divide, right? We have the ultra-wealthy billionaires who might just be able to feed millions of people the staple dal chawal for a month without breaking a sweat. We also have the urban poor who live on their month-to-month paychecks. And then there's the ultra-poor who scramble for even daily rations. But even in cities where folks like you and I, we are so diverse and we have very different health and nutritional needs. Does urban India also have challenges and issues in addressing its nutritional needs?
One would actually assume that, it would be more so, say, in rural areas where, people don't have so much of awareness, but it is so much so also in urban areas. On one side, you've got, say, the well-to-do people, but they have micronutrient deficiencies because of stereotypes, because of certain foods that they avoid eating, or because they believe that certain foods are, say, more beneficial. So a lot of people won't end up having vegetables. They go on these fat diets with having more proteins, but they're not having adequate amount of fruits and vegetables. So they also have micronutrient deficiencies. On the other side, you also have the growing NCDs because people have become very sedentary. Even children, adolescents, in fact, are now facing hypertension, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, which is quite scary. In fact, 1 in 5 children also have that problem. So these kind of issues are something which are concerning our urban population. Food that you're getting in urban areas, you have to make sure that it is fresh, because sometimes it has to come from a lot of faraway places, because these places are not conducive for growing vegetables and fruits in the nearby area. So when they are traveling a lot of distance, you have to make sure that the proper cold storage is maintained, that proper safety is maintained, so that when the people are getting the food, it is a fresh farm produce, right? That's one thing. The other is, do we have instances where surveillance drives prove that, some sort of adulteration is being done, not just deliberately, but it may also be happening because of the way in which the food has moved in the food chain. So these are issues that we really need to take consideration of. Now, when we talk about the food is not just a subject which is restricted to FSSAI in terms of, say, safety or hygiene, but it is the food which is pervasive through all sectors. For instance, not just in production, but also while it is being processed, while it is being retailed, while it is being transported, while it is being marketed, while it is being placed in a shop. And then when the consumer brings the food home, how is the consumer cooking that food and then having it? What are the right practices? So the Eat Right initiative of FSSAI primarily focuses on food as something which is not just safe, healthy, but should also be sustainable for the environment. And it should also be eaten in a way which actually benefits the body. It's always so much better to have local seasonal food. One, it's affordable. And second, it has all the nutrients that your body needs. And since it's seasonal, it is something that's easy to digest. Now, a lot of people in our country have so many myths about vegetables. A lot of vegetarians I know about who don't eat vegetables. I don't know what kind of vegetarians are there, but they only eat paneer, they'll only eat potato, and they'll only eat bhindi. I don't know, just
Yeah.
few vegetables.
Growing up, we've always heard that, broccoli is one of the vegetables that's hated but so good for you. It's just probably a metaphor for a lot of like real life issues that parents and children face with, eating healthy and all of that.
One of the things which I'm trying to do now is, take up a vegetable which is not so popular. For instance, in October, we've taken up pumpkin. And next month, I'm going to take up elephant's foot or jimmican. A lot of people have this myth. It has no nutritional value, whereas it's amazing. Every vegetable has some nutritional value. It doesn't mean you have to eat it every day, but if you have it occasionally and it's cooked properly, it's always nice to have. Tori, Cedar. No, it does. It does. It tastes wonderful. In FSSAI, we've just launched a recipe challenge where I've told people that why don't you share recipes in which those vegetables are made in a more creative way. Like I make things so creatively. So many people are so amazed by what I do. So Navratras are going on and everybody thinks the only thing you can have is sabudana, khichdi and potatoes, right? No. So today for breakfast, I had like jackfruit flour with mashed sweet potato, and I put some peanuts and some dates, and I made it into pancakes, and I had that with peanut butter. So it's so nutritious and gorgeous. I know it sounds amazing. What we
consider sharing them?
Yeah. We do that. So we will make it into a book where a lot of the recipes which all our FSSAI people, including me, will be sharing. We put it in the form of a book and we put it on our website. All unusual recipes, but based on the food which we're eating. I mean, the fruits and vegetables which are available. A lot of people don't eat papaya. I don't know why they don't eat papaya. So what I do is I just take frozen papaya. I just take papaya. I cut it in the morning at 6. I put it in the freezer for an hour. Then I just put any form of non-dairy milk, any milk, or even if you soak, say 10 or 15 almonds or cashews and just blend it together with some raw cacao, and you put a little bit of protein shake and have it. It's amazing.
Inoshi was giving us some lovely recipe ideas for nutritious food.
Yes.
Rich in micronutrients.
Sure.
Vinita, are kids in Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities in India nutritionally healthy? Is it only up to parents to provide like a balanced, wholesome diet, or can NGOs and food regulators also kind of support them in doing that?
So you've asked me many questions in one question, and I will attempt to answer all of them. All of India is actually undernourished or malnourished. And this is a big statement that I am making. If you look at numbers that come out of the National Family and Health Surveys, the last one of which was done in 15-16, roughly about 40% of children are either underweight or wasted or stunted, which in simple English means that my weight for my age is low, my height for my age is low, and the reason for that is just poor eating. Again, you've got to break down the causes of poor eating, and those are not very simple or easy to understand always. Of course, poverty is the biggest cause, but lack of awareness and education is another big cause. So if you look at children in school in India, almost more than 60% of school-going children are deficient in iron and anemic because of iron deficiency. There was a very important landmark study done and published in the Lancet in, I think, 2008, which established for the first time the irreversible link between nutrition in the first 1,000 days, that is from conception to your second birthday, to your ability for physical growth and cognitive development. So if an underweight mother is giving birth to underweight children, and 1 out of every 3 children born in India is born underweight, then we are perpetuating this vicious cycle of undernutrition and malnutrition. So I think we have to understand nutrition in the larger context of our culture, in the larger context of our economics, in the larger context of awareness of good health and nutrition. So to answer your question very specifically, there is undernutrition and malnutrition all over India. It's only the degree that varies.
I think it's a very valid question because recently what we've done at FSSAI, we've come out with a regulation for schools where foods which are high in salt, fat, and sugar can no longer be sold within the school. And it's the school's responsibility to make sure that, healthy, nutritious food is available in their canteens or in their mess or in the meals which are being provided to schools. And it also places the responsibility on the food business operators or the food businesses to make sure that foods which are, again, HFSS, high in salt, fat, and sugar, cannot be sold within the school. Now, that was done because a lot of times, children through peer pressure or, when they are with their friends, end up having food just, because it's so much cooler to have food which is not so high in salt, fat, and sugar, like we know, maybe chips or deep fried items. And it's not so cool to have homemade food. But it is also true that many times if a choice is not available to you, for instance, if a choice is not available between a deep fried item and a healthier item, and only the deep fried item is made and you've not brought food from home, you will end up eating it because you're hungry. So we wanted to make sure that if a child is learning about a balanced diet in their science class, they should also have a balanced diet in the mess. And then this information gets reiterated into their personal lives. Now, when they go back home, for instance, and they're again having this kind of food, then it's broken. So where does the responsibility then fall on? On parents. So some sort of monitoring to ensure that foods which are high in salt, fat, and sugar are not regularly provided, maybe as a once in a while indulgence or maybe as a family treat. I don't know. It's up to the parents how they want to do it. But it has to be done because it is playing a havoc with children's lives. We had the recent CNS report in October 2019, and it showed alarming figures regarding adolescents both in urban and in rural areas in terms of type 2 diabetes, in terms of NCDs. So this is something that we have to take care for our children. We owe it to them.
The responsibility is, it's not the government's responsibility to keep us healthy and nutritious. The government impacts a lot of things through food policy and pricing and access to nutritious food. We're talking about a country where 800 million people are relying on the public distribution system for their basic requirements of grains. The task is multifold. We have to educate people. We have to increase awareness on nutrition. We have to work with the private sector, with NGOs, as well as with the government to ensure that there is a bigger and bigger marketplace for nutritious foods.
How nutrition needs are actually tracked? Like, how do we know that this much of the population is actually suffering from undernourishment or malnourishment? And then this much of the population is actually benefiting from programs like fortification programs you mentioned.
So actually that's like a huge study. There's a cost benefit analysis which is taken out on the basis of DALY. So that's your daily adjusted life years. It's quite complicated to talk about it here, but what it really means is that you find out your target population and you try to make an estimate of what they are eating throughout, the day, what kind of work they are doing, and does it actually meet their nutritional requirements of their spending on health if they are not well.
You've asked a very important and interesting question on how do we measure the nutritional status of our population. So the government does the NFHS, the National Family and Health Survey. The last one was done in 2015-16. It is not something that is updated every year. And it would be a great initiative to actually update it every year. Like we monitor our data on economic performance, monitoring data on health and nutrition indicators would also be very, very useful. There was a very big report done in 2012 and released in 2012 called Hangama, which was an all India survey. And that talked about hunger and nutrition in India. There are other surveys that are done on the basis of which, for example, Niti Aayog right now has identified the 100 most backward districts in India. So there is data that is collected from a variety of sources and put together. Globally, there is the Human Development Index, which looks at issues of hunger, nutrition, but also education, access to food, etc. And that ranks India vis-a-vis other countries, as well as India on its own index. No matter which way you look at it, the fact that we cannot escape from is that hunger and nutrition are very key issues in India. Another thing which is important to remember is that India is a signatory to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, to the Millennium Development Goals, and the first 2 or 3 goals within that are about zero hunger, access to nutritious food, etc. Which actually means that what we have signed up for is that by 2030, we will significantly improve the access to nutritious food. Niti Aayog has taken a fairly stringent objective, I would say, which is to reduce by 2% every year the level of wasting and stunting, etc. I should also mention that in the last decade or so, India has done well when it comes to reducing the levels of stunting. However, the pandemic that we are going through right now and the experience with COVID is actually setting us back. And that's a very significant and important factor. Inoshi talked about the midday meal. Yes, we have a midday meal scheme that gives hot meals to 120 million children in schools every day during the time that the school is open, let's say about 250 days a year. Because of COVID-19, the schools have been closed. So these children who were actually assured of a hot cooked meal in school every day are not getting that. We have 1.4 million Anganwadi centers that have been designed to cater to the needs of children 0 to 6 years, as well as expecting and nursing mothers, both by way of supplements, IFA pills, as well as take-home rations. And those have also been disrupted as a result of COVID. Now, because the schools are closed, it is almost impossible to access these children. So staple food fortification actually is one of the easiest ways. It costs very little because you have to add only a little bit of these micronutrients. And if food companies, NGOs, state government, central government come together and say food that is cooked in Anganwadi centers will only be cooked with iodized salt, will only be cooked with edible oil that has been fortified with vitamins A and D. Yeah. It will not solve the entire problem, but it will certainly be one of the important solutions in the solving of the problem.
So that's true. In fact, the government has a number of programs. Under the health ministry, adolescent girls are given with VIPS, which is the iron folic acid supplementation, which is the weekly tablet being provided. And through the midday meal scheme, also it is ensured that, nutritious food is being provided. Now, this is in the school. At the Anganwadi again, in the villages, food is being provided so that, these girls have sufficient levels of nutrients so that when they are expecting, their body can cope with it. And when they are expecting, again, there is the government scheme where they are being provided with iron and folic acid. Now, this is just part of it. The major part is the actual diet that a woman is having. And many times it is not enough. What time is she having? Is she having after everybody's had in the home? Then she won't have much to have. So there are a lot of things that we are working on. And that is why fortification becomes so important. That at least if she's having a staple like rice or wheat, she gets some of her micronutrients. With micronutrient deficiency, what happens is the first thing that you, notice is tiredness, sluggishness, your immunity is compromised. So you are more prone to, illnesses very frequently. And this in turn affects your productivity. That means you are losing out on that many days in which you could have actually productively contributed. we are trying to promote fortification on a large scale in the country. Already, it is mandatory to provide fortified food in programs such as the ICDS and the Midday Meal Scheme. Even under the PDS scheme, fortified staples are being provided. We are working so that it is also available in the open market, as well as developing regulations and trying to make it mandatory in the coming months, at least for oil and for milk, and maybe after a few years for rice.
If the common interest is nutrition, I think all of us can bring in, not just a different perspective, but a different action orientation to tackling this. It is huge. We can all spend our entire life and still not be done with it. That's how big the issue is.
I know. But it was just amazing meeting you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Bye.
See you, Inoshi. See you, Inoshi.
I think the pandemic especially, we've had a lot of conversations, Abigail and I, with experts in the climate side of things, where they've said, it's shaken up so many different industries, and it's thrown us totally out of whack. But is there a baseline nutritional need for these 120 million kids in both rural and urban India? Is there maybe a baseline of access to nutritious food that can be sort of guaranteed via plan A, plan B, or plan C? This is probably a more of a...
nutrition is a complex subject and requires many interventions at many levels for it to actually gain traction and work well. Yeah. So nutrition is about access to nutritious food, just as much as it is access to good quality and potable water. You can give me all the nutritious food, but if I'm getting infection from the water I'm drinking, then that's not going to be of much use. It is about access to hygiene and sanitation. It is about access to primary health care. If I have an issue, I should be treated almost immediately. So there are many, many layers to nutrition, which doesn't mean that it is, so complex that it cannot be solved. Think about, our grandmothers and the foods they used to eat. Mausam ki sabzi aur phal khana chahiye. Eat something which grows near where you live. We've gotten out of a lot of those habits. And I think just reinforcing those behaviors, I know Inoshi gave you examples, but from chana to dal to lassi to, to spinach, to everyday kinds of foods that are actually healthy and nutritious. And if only people were educated to consume more and more of this diversity of products in our diet without getting too technical about it. You must have a fruit every day. You must have, either dahi or milk every day. You must have some cereal every day. You must have some vegetables every day. And then just make sure that, other things that you're having, if you can buy a fortified version, it's better than a non-fortified version. So I think it's some of those simple things. And to the people who are more vulnerable and at risk, those are the people we cater to in the Anganwadi centers, in the schools through the midday program, etc.
So, when you go to these kind of big malls or big basket stores where that sell this really expensive food, and they sell a lot of these juices and like smoothies and other kind of foods that they say have immunity boosters or maybe like a nutrition booster kind of a thing. We know it doesn't really, does it really work? And second, does it really have any kind of, does it really impact us? Like, are we getting those kind of nutrition that we should be getting with the addition thing? So is it just like a wasted effort?
It's not a wasted effort. FSSAI has done a lot of work in terms of setting standards for food products and the claims that you can make. So if it is a well-known brand that has gone through the FSSAI process of certification, then certainly the minimum requirement is present in the food that is being sold. We also need to be very clear about differentiating fact from fad. Suddenly there are so many brands of haldi doodh available because, guess what? Suddenly in India, we've discovered how wonderful haldi is as an antibiotic, as reducing inflation, etc. And yet, look at the way we cook. Haldi is put into almost every Indian vegetable or dal or sambar or everything. So, A, let us not get too carried away. B, yes, for the sake of convenience. I mean, if you can't get up every morning and mix your haldi and your tulsi and all that, and you'd rather drink it in a product which is available in the market, that's great. But that alone cannot be your diet. It can be something that supplements your diet. If your intrinsic diet is not healthy, if your intrinsic diet is not nutritious, then all these supplements are just fads. They can add to it, but they are not a substitute. I think a wholesome diet is something which is freshly cooked, is something that has a good balance of carbs and proteins and fats. All fat is not bad. All of us definitely need fat. Don't do anything in excess, whether it is excess of proteins or excess of carbs or excess of fats. Also, don't deprive yourself of anything. A lot of us supplement that by popping a multivitamin pill or calcium or vitamin D or whatever. There's a pervasive deficiency of vitamin D in India, despite the fact that, so many Indians spend so much time in the sun. Part of it is genetic, you can't help it. So, first of all, it becomes important to be aware of your nutritional status. Then it becomes important to take responsibility for your own nutrition. Those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to afford a diverse palette, those of us who are fortunate enough to have access to all kinds of information, we take interest in so many things that make us look good. Why don't we take as much interest in those things that make us feel good from the inside?
Do we have any kind of tools or any way to find out if the food that we are eating is nutritious? Is there any way that we can make these smart decisions other than just being intuitive and listening to our own body when we are eating?
Nutrition is as much of a science as it is, great organoleptic delight, wonderful, tasty food that we all want to consume. And it is a science because what happens is whatever food we eat is then broken up by our digestive system in very, very smart ways. A good nutritionist will explain to you what works for you because nutrition is also very individual. What works for me may or may not work for you. So, access to nutritionists is one thing. Online, there are several apps, etc., that tell you, how many calories, how many carbs, etc., you get from certain foods. There is one app that has been developed by an organization recently, which I think is a very good app. It actually, you put in what you've eaten, and they've got a data bank of something like, I don't know, 5,000 or 6,000 foods, ranging all the way from Rogan Josh to, a healthy boiled chanas, and what nutrients each of these have. So if you put in your data, saying yesterday I consumed so much, the output that it gives you is, so therefore in what you consumed, what was the level of protein, carbs, fats, other vitamins and minerals. So yes, there is a lot available out there. Think of the human body as being this wonderful thing that starts working from the moment of conception and continues to work without a Sunday, without a weekend, without anything, till the time we have our last breath. And our responsibility to this wonderful, body and mind and spirit that has been gifted to us is to take care of it. To take care of it through food, through nutritious food, through adequate exercise, through adequate, relaxation, etc. And unless each of us takes responsibility for our own health, there is nobody who can complement or supplement that. They can give us advice, they can point us in the right direction, but ultimately it is our own behavior that determines the quality of life and the quality of health and the quality of living we experience. A
This is so
wonderful.
lovely.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye bye. That was it from this week's podcast. Since we're coming to an end of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, join us next week where we will be talking about why it's important for both men and women to consider regular health checkups. If you have any questions for our health experts, send them over to us and we will ask them. Until then, it is Abigail and Kavya signing off. Catch you later on the Earth, Space, and the Human Race podcast.